Hello everyone and welcome back to our lecture series on pharmacology. Today I present to you the fifth part of the lecture series entitled Drug Invention and the Pharmaceutical Industry. My name is Dr. Carlos Rogério Figueiredo. I'm an adjunct professor at the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Turku in Finland. And before we begin, I just want to take a moment to emphasize the importance of your support for this project. By subscribing to our channel and sharing this video with others or your friends who might be interested as well, you become an invaluable part of our community, and your engagement helps us to reach a wider audience, spreading knowledge and fostering discussions on crucial topics like drug invention and the pharmaceutical industry. And thank you very much for your support so far. So another thing that I would like to discuss here is the drug prices. It can cause a lot of worries in the population. Some newly introduced drugs in the market, particularly those for cancer treatment, they have high prices that far exceed the costs of their development and marketing. And many of these drugs, they were actually discovered in government or university labs that received funding from federal grants. In the United States, for example, where drug prices are not regulated, these costs are often higher than in other countries. And this leads to US population feel like that they are unfairly shouldering the burden of the global drug costs, which is a fair point. So developing new drugs is a costly, lengthy, and risky process, and only a small fraction of potential drugs actually make it to the market. So prices need to be high enough to cover not the expenses related with that particular drug, but actually with the other drugs that failed in the development process, because they involve a lot of consumables and expenses and fees and regulatory taxes and so forth. And to support the marketing efforts to develop new drugs as well is extremely expensive. New projects for new drugs, and to maintain the evaluation of the existing drugs immediately released in the market as well is a costly process. So that's why eventually you might think it's overly costed, but there are other things to be taken into account here as well. However, did you know that prescription drugs account for only 10% of total healthcare spending in the United States? And a significant portion of that is spent on affordable generic medications, not the expensive ones. So even if drug prices were significantly reduced, it would only have a minor impact on overall healthcare costs, lowering them by just a few percentage points. But anyways, let's move on in our conversation, because I would like to discuss with you whether the profit margin for the pharmaceutical companies is too high or not. And this is a challenging question to answer, to be completely honest. It's generally agreed upon that the industries with higher risks, they should have the potential for greater rewards, and the pharmaceutical industry is quite risky actually. So the costs involved in bringing a drug to the market, they are substantial, extremely high. And you need to remember that success rates of a new drug, they are extremely low. It's not easy to develop a successful drug. We barely understand our own biology. We don't know almost anything about our own cells in the molecular and atomic levels. We can't predict, we can predict some drug resistance, but our biology and the complexity of our genome provides the ability to our body, cells, tissues, and systems to evolve and adapt to these drugs and therapies as well. So eventually we develop resistance, and then this challenges the success rates of that particular drug. And as I mentioned before, the drugs are not perfect. They have side effects. So the success rates are already low. And there is one thing more to take into account in this equation here, which is the competition. There are other industries as well trying to develop drugs for the same disease. So they are competing with each other. So in recent decades, actually, the pharmaceutical industry has evolved to the degree that they start merging with one another, leading to fewer major players in the market. So we don't have many major companies nowadays. AstraZeneca is one example of that. This is the merger of two big companies in a few decades ago. So these ongoing transformations continues to shape the industry's future, and it presents also several challenges, but it's actually to maximize the chances of success in developing a new drug that could effectively work in the market. And what is the financial responsibility in the healthcare systems? And I will focus this discussion in the US healthcare system, one of the biggest ones, and also aligned with the pharmaceutical companies in the country. So in the United States, the healthcare system is a combination of private and government-funded programs, right? When it comes for paying the prescription drugs, there are three main sources: the individuals paying out of their own pockets, private insurance, and public insurance programs like Medicare and Medicaid. So recently, private insurance companies operating major retail chains and also the mail order pharmacies, they have introduced incentives for consumers to choose generic drugs that are cheaper. This actually helps to keep the portion of the household expenses dedicated to medications manageable. You can actually have all this portfolio of drugs. If they're cheaper, you can afford all of them in your budget. However, we need to remember that more than 1/3 of total retail drug costs in the United States, they are covered by public funds, which means that taxpayers already contribute to these expenses, right? So despite spending more on healthcare compared with many other countries, the United States healthcare system does not consistently deliver superior quality care, right? And this is well known. And also, the socio-economic diversity in the United States, which is more significant than many other countries in the world, adds additional complexities to this matter. So approximately 45 million Americans, they do not have health insurance, and they often rely on emergency rooms for routine medications or medical needs. And finding solutions actually to these challenges is a crucial topic now going to many discussions within the medical, the public health, economy, society, and the political realms as well. So any viable solution, it must address the need to encourage innovation effectively while also promoting compassionate medical care. It needs to be a compassionate medical care for all individuals. We are talking about the diversity. So all these 45 million people, they don't have access to that. 45 million is a significant number, right? And what is the role of intellectual property, IP, so to speak, and patents in drug innovation? So like any other invention, drug discovery does generate IP, intellectual property, that is actually eligible for patent protection. So without this protection, the companies, they would be disencouraged to invest in drug invention and development due to the lack of return on investments. So this is easy to understand, right? They want to invest, they want the returns, but they want to do this in something that is meaningful. So better the pharmaceutical industry expecting returns for something that is meaningful to develop a new drug that can heal diseases than, for example, the tobacco industry that's actually expecting returns for something that is destructive. But this is another matter. We can discuss this in a podcast, for example. So in 1980s, the Bayh-Dole Act propelled scientists at academic medical centers to take a business innovative approach to drug invention by transferring IP rights to the researchers themselves or their institution as well in certain cases. So there was a lot of collaborations between pharma and academics. So the primary goal was actually of this transfer was to foster partnerships and thus enabling the development and marketing of the new products that could benefit the public. And as a consequence, technology transfer offices, they were established at most major universities to assist scientists in patent application and negotiation licensing agreements with the industry. So the current US patent protection system stipulates a 20-year duration from the time of filing for a new drug patent. And during this period, the patent owner can legally prevent others from marketing the product and then guaranteeing exclusive rights to the market and sell the drug to the original brand manufacturer. So once the patent expires, similar products or generics, they are allowed to enter the market and usually at lower costs than the original drug, and also without the initial development costs borne by the original patent holder, right? So these generics, they must demonstrate therapeutic equivalence, meaning that they contain equal amounts of the same active chemical ingredient and they achieve equal concentrations in the blood as well when they are administered by the same routes. So these things need to be taken into account. They need to reach these standards. However, the extended process of drug development, often exceeding a decade, greatly diminishes the duration of the effective patent protection. So the Drug Price Competition and Patent Term Restoration Act of 1984, which is also known as the Hatch-Waxman Act, it does allow for patent extensions to compensate for delays in marketing due to the FDA approval process, for example. But extensions are limited to half of the period consumed by the regulatory approval, and they are usually capped at 14 years. So actually, most of the drugs on the market today, they benefit from only around 10 to 12 years of patent protection. And a prevalent argument proposes that the patent protection for drugs, they should be shortened, and hoping that earlier genetic competition will reduce healthcare costs for the well-being of the population as well, the financial well-being of the population. So pharmaceutical companies are often accused of lacking innovation, being risk-averse, and even worse, decelerating the medical progress due to their overemphasis on these Me Too drugs. And the truth of the matter is that despite massive investments in research and development, there has been a decline in new molecular entities that are approved by the FDA over the past decade. So this has manifested even with the flourishing combinatorial chemistry or with the human genome being completely sequenced and even new automated screening methods being applied. So there are various interpretations that come to try to explain this disconnect, and some blame the company mismanagement, or while others will argue that the industry science lacks now quality, although this is easily refutable. But some would suggest that easier opportunities have been exhausted, and that developing drugs for more complex diseases such as neurodegenerative disease, psychiatric disorders, or even cancer will be more challenging nowadays. But we need to remember that the biotechnology industry has made some breakthroughs, particularly in utilizing the opportunity offered by the new recombinant DNA technology that provided with new insulin or growth hormone, erythropoietin, or even more recently, the monoclonal antibodies that are targeting complex molecules expressed extracellularly. So these are new technologies that are providing new avenues for research and development, which is not progressing as quick as it should. So finally, I would like to discuss with you about the Me Too drugs and a genuine innovation, right? What's the velocity of a novel drug development? So the pharmaceutical arena has a recurring phenomenon known as Me Too drugs. What does that mean? These are medications that bear remarkable resemblance, typically in molecular structure, to the already existing drugs in the market. So the Me Too drugs, they are also known as derivative medications or molecular modifications, follow-up drugs, and so forth. So sometimes a competitor intentionally actually develops a Me Too drug, which is slightly different at the molecular level from the original one, just aiming at snatch a share from the existing products in the market. So such competition is often seen when the market for a drug class is gigantic enough to accommodate multiple profitable players as well. So we can see this emerging with the anti-PD-1 drugs. The first, it was nivolumab treating and targeting PD-1. Then they're developing now pembrolizumab, which pretty much targets the ligand of this receptor. And then we have other anti-PD-1 emerging drugs as well, because the market's so huge. So there are several monoclonal antibodies now developed against PD-1 and PD-L1 as opposed to the original one that was just antibodies targeting the same target for the same purpose. So these are Me Too drugs. So interestingly, some Me Too drugs, they are mere slight modifications of the company's existing drugs. They're just repacked or remarked as a new innovative product when they are actually not. So take, for instance, the heartburn medication esomeprazole. It was made by the same pharmaceutical company that developed omeprazole. So the latter is a mix of two stereoisomers, and the former contains only one of these isomers, and it's metabolized slower, but they are the same molecule, they have the same purpose, same mechanism of action, same target, and so forth. So criticisms of Me Too drugs, they are often grounded in several realities. One contention is that a profit-centric mindset could inhibit true innovation, and this is actually the case. Of the 487 drugs that were approved by the FDA between 1998 and 2003, a mere 14%, roughly 67 drugs, they were actually deemed to be new molecular entities, not the other ones. Another critique is that some Me Too drugs, they are more expensive than the older versions that they attempt to replace. So this inflates the healthcare costs without corresponding benefits for the patients. However, some Me Too drugs, they are not entirely devoid of benefits. Some of them, they might really present improved efficacy or even lesser side effects, or to promote better treatment adherence for certain patients. For instance, a Me Too medication that requires only once-a-day administration can really enhance patient compliance, and it makes it more convenient to adhere to that particular treatment. From a business and medical standpoint, some Me Too drugs, they do offer substantial value. Atorvastatin, for instance, is the 7th statin to hit the market. It ultimately emerged as the world's top-selling drug. Parallel product introduction in other industries as well is generally perceived as a healthy competition. So this competitive spirit becomes more prominent in the pharmaceutical industry when a drug class begins to start losing patent protection. So for instance, the sales of atorvastatin, they have been declining since non-proprietary versions of the simvastatin became more available. And finally, considering the astonishing advances in genetics and molecular biology that are still relatively new, by the way, and also the lengthy timelines of drug development, we get that, we scientists are optimistic that it is possible indeed to accelerate the current molecular medicine to develop more efficient specific pharmacological treatments to a broad range of human diseases. Thank you very much for your support, and if you have any questions, please write in the comments below. I'm more than happy to come here and answer for you. I'll see you in the next lecture. Stay curious and keep learning. Bye-bye.